All right. I see the box appears. It's flashing. That can only mean one thing. No, it's not an emergency. It means we're in fact live. And that's my cue to say hello, everyone. Good evening, afternoon, or morning, depending on what part of the world or country you hail from. I'm your host for the Rock and Roll Channel, Steve Harkins, and thanks so much for joining us today. We know you have a myriad of viewing and entertainment options, and that's why we strive to raise the bar on our shows. And we're so blessed to have one of the all-time greats in rock with us today. So Sam, with that, if you would, please roll the digital. So tonight we're celebrating one of rock's all-time greats, known as the co-founder, bassist, and primary lyricist of one of the most influential bands to date, with over 70 million records sold, which is just astounding and still counting. He was responsible for the band's name and laying down the foundation of hard rock. You notice I didn't say heavy metal. I'll explain that later. His book, Into the Void, tells the story from his upbringing to the various stages of his musical career. There's no holding back. And folks, it's a fascinating read. The book is officially released today on paperback. And congratulations to Geezer. Is available now on the Rock and Roll channel for all of you fans. And as his way of saying thank you, Geezer has graciously agreed to sign copies of Into the Void, purchased here, but hurry, as they're limited. And I have it on good authority, a portion of these proceeds will go towards the recovery of his slight arthritic condition, which he developed signing all of these books for you fans. So thanks for helping speed that recovery. Just hit the buy button. The rest is quick, easy, and pain-free. And you've heard me say this before, but it's true. There's no better way to show your appreciation than by purchasing the latest body of work by the author and artist. Thank you for your continued support of Geezer Butler and the Rock and Roll Channel. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, a killer bassist, amazing stage presence, a great lyricist, often I think understated too in that area, and a songwriter. Please welcome Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, the one, the only Geezer Butler. Geezer,
Well,
great to see you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that marvelous introduction.
You made it easy. If I did the long version, we would have had probably 5 minutes left to talk about the book.
I think it makes me want to dye my hair again.
Well, no reason why you can't do that. In fact, we have two ladies who founded Manic Panic, if you're looking for interesting colors, but that's for another time to discuss. I just want to tell fans, for those of you that want to submit questions or comments for Geezer, just hit the chat button and we'll get to as many of them as possible. So first off, Geezer, congratulations on the release today of the paperback version. So, man, it's a great read. And I'm just curious, did you find the exercise of putting this book together a cathartic experience for you?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I started out just wanting to do a memoir for my grandkids, because when my parents passed away, there was like a million things that I wanted to ask them and never did while they were alive. I sort of took them for granted.
Right.
But when the pandemic hit, I was stuck at home for like 9 months or something. And I was like bored out of my skull. So I thought, I'm just going to write a memoir for my grandkids and for their future generation, just to, give an insight into the life I led and how it led to them being born and that kind of stuff. So it was a cathartic experience.
Yeah. And it also has to seem almost like you're revisiting, time past, like you're entering an alternate universe, because it's amazing, man, the longevity of your career musically. You're calling the shots. It's not the public saying, hey, Geezer, we've had enough of you. You're kind of going on your own terms.
Yeah, and in fact, it was easier to remember when I was a kid and the 70s with Sabbath, and then seems to be like when the 80s happened, just like seems to be a big blur.
Yeah. Well, don't feel bad.
And
Most of us.
Also, I'm terrified of getting dementia. So it's going to be nice for me to remember what I did.
You've immortalized it, so you don't have to worry about that. And I was starting to say, Geezer, don't feel bad about the 80s. None of us remember those. So Yeah, and you remark in the book that Aston strange things would occur with regularity, and that it made sense that Black Sabbath was born there.
Yeah, there seemed to be a lot of spiritual things happening. I mean, the book starts off with a quote from one of the local newspapers about two women that saw like a Victorian woman crossing the road and then just completely disappearing, and it happened twice. And then I went through quite a few supernatural experiences. We used to stay at my grandmother's house in Dublin, in Ireland,
Yeah,
and it was just this really weird atmosphere always there. And this one day, I went out to go into my bedroom, and I just saw this like figure just floating down the stairs. And I had a thing that happened to me while I was in bed this one night. A sphere appeared to me and sort of showed me a glimpse into the future, and just things like that kept happening to me when I was a child.
yeah, and you were pretty graphic in describing that figure in the sphere. I think you said he was holding a guitar with silver boots.
What I imagined was a guitar, yeah, because I'd never seen a guitar up until then, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And it wasn't until much later in the early 70s, I was in London. I saw a pair of silver platform boots, and it
Yeah,
just brought the whole thing back to me because I thought it was like
incredible.
some kind of spaceman
Yeah,
in this vision,
and,
and
yeah,
just reminded me of the whole thing.
yeah, and just so you know, I too have had similar experiences. So that knock on your door is not someone with a white jacket saying, "That's it, geezer, we're taking you away."
Well, I found out about sleep paralysis lately.
Yeah,
Um, And I don't know whether that explains things.
yeah,
A lot of people have experienced it. I think it's like a twilight sleep, and they see visions of demons and things like that. So
right.
like an actual medical condition.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just share with people, for those of you maybe a bit younger that might take things today for granted, you grew up with no heat and often heated up bricks, wrapped them in cloth to warm up your bed. And also, bed bugs were the uninvited household pets, for that matter. No hot water, no bathroom in the facility, and that's your way of life. You didn't know any different, but in retrospect, when you consider that, it's pretty amazing your upbringing.
Yeah, and it was like, I mean, England, where we were brought up in Aston in Birmingham, and Birmingham got absolutely flattened during World War II
That's right.
because Birmingham was like the main centre of building all the armaments, and Spitfires were built there and tanks were built there. All the armaments were built in Birmingham. And so the Luftwaffe completely flattened the place. And when I was born, like literally 4 years after the war ended, everything was still like bombed out. And it wasn't
Right.
until not 1960 when things were being built up again. And until I was about 15 or 16, we didn't have an indoor toilet, no hot water or anything like that. So it was, and hardly any food because food was still rationed up until the first 6 years of my life.
That's
I
right.
think I finally saw an orange when I was about 16.
That's amazing to think of that. I think you also mentioned too that there was also a hole in the roof from some of the bombing that took place.
Well, there was a shop and two houses on the corner, like three houses away from our house. They got completely flattened, and it
Wow,
blew like the roof off our house and the house next door.
incredible. Incredible. Also, an interesting observation that the number seven has a significance in your world.
Yeah, well, I was born on the 17th of the seventh month, 1949, which is 7/7, 7 minutes to midnight. And I was the seventh child of a seventh child.
Incredible.
Whether that had anything to do with the supernatural bits, I don't know.
Yeah. And the irony is your lucky number's eight, right? No, I'm just kidding. I just made
No,
that
no, nine.
up. And Geezer, I thought there was a typo in the book. When you mentioned at 13 you were allowed to drop two subjects and swap out in school those two subjects, and I had to read it a couple of times. You said you dropped music and you dropped art and picked up German and economics. I thought I had that backwards.
No, that's what I did because
Yeah,
the music lessons were like non-existent. The teacher used to literally walk into the classroom, put on a classical record on a record player, then disappear until the record finished. Then he'd come back in
yeah,
and wouldn't say anything. We didn't have to like write anything down or anything. It was just like literally listening to this classical music for 45 minutes. And as far as art was concerned, I was the worst artist on earth.
yeah.
And I was always coming last in the art class. So I just thought, I'm just going to drop this.
Amazing. And you also indicated that unlike several musicians who went on to great success, your home wasn't necessarily filled with all kinds of music where, it was just, you were just completely surrounded by it. But you mentioned thankfully that you discovered Radio Luxembourg and that your first two albums you purchased were in fact Muddy Waters, I'm from Chicago, he has a warm spot in my heart, and also Dizzy Gillespie. Although I understand that some of that money that you used to buy those albums may have been intended to be spent on your sister's birthday.
Yeah, she was a Cliff Richard fanatic. She
Yeah,
loved Cliff Richard. So I
yeah,
went down to this record shop, and it was owned by Jamaicans, this record shop, and they'd sold out of Cliff Richard. But
right.
the guy says, "But we got some albums for the same amount of money that on sale. We want to get rid of them."
Yeah,
And I said, "Well, what are they?" And they said, "Muddy Waters and Dizzy Gillespie." And I said, "Okay, I'll have those then."
yeah.
And
Go
that was
figure.
the first two albums I bought.
Go figure. They were trying to get rid of them.
Yeah,
That's
and I've still got them.
yeah. That's great. And for the record too, you did buy your sister, I think, a chocolate candy bar, so she
Yeah,
still she still got a gift out of the deal.
yeah.
Yeah. Not a surprise, but the Beatles planted musical stakes in your ground, and it was "Love Me Do." And your brother Jimmy observed that you were obsessed with John Lennon, and he had the heart. What a great brother to buy you a Rossetti semi-acoustic guitar. And you say that this act of kindness really changed your life.
It did because I was obsessed with the Beatles, and that's all I wanted to do. For some reason, that's all I had this like ambition to always want to be either a fifth member of the Beatles
Yeah,
or in a band just like them.
yeah,
And my brother saw how dedicated I was to. Because I had the first guitar I bought, my brother bought me. It only had two strings on it, and I was like learning all the Beatles songs and everything on these two strings. And I was like so serious about it. He went out and bought me a proper eight-string guitar and started learning chords and stuff like that.
yeah. With two strings, which is incredible. Thankfully, yeah, he upgraded you, and you were able to learn the proper chords. Now you formed your first band, the Rums, with two U's, if I'm saying that properly, in 1965. And I have to ask, are there any Rums T-shirts floating around? Uh,
Absolutely not.
yeah, good answer. I had a feeling. And sounds like you were fairly good for a first band.
Well, we thought we were,
Yeah.
but most of the audiences didn't.
Well, that same year, though, you won the musical lottery, so to speak, by receiving a free ticket to see your favorite band, the Beatles. And that's a great story.
Yeah, the manager of the Birmingham Odeon where the Beatles were playing, she her daughter really fancied me at the
Yeah.
time. And the tickets were like 8 shillings, which was about what 50 cents or something.
Yeah.
And even that I couldn't afford. So
Right.
luckily, because the manager of the Odeon's daughter fancied me, she got me a free ticket, and I went to see like my heroes, the Beatles, And of course, I couldn't hear a bloody
Right.
thing because of the
Right.
screaming. And I came out, and it's just like having tinnitus for 3 days afterwards.
You know, which is really a shame because 1965, that was a pretty good set list that they had, pretty diverse range of songs they played.
Yeah, and it was the last tour as well that they ever did.
Yeah, well, if it makes you feel any better, you know, I went to see Hard Day's Night at the movie theater, and I kept telling the young screaming girls to shut up so I could hear the songs, and I was escorted out the door, so I never got to see the entire film. If that makes you feel any better. So the rum soon morphed into the rare breed. But I guess before we get into that, you'd also listed the Stones behind the Beatles, and then right behind that, which makes sense, the Kinks. The following year that you saw the Beatles, you saw the Stones, and recall that you stated that they were close to being blown off the stage by another act, and it wasn't the Beatles.
It was Ike and Tina Turner.
Not surprised.
Um, and I'd heard the single over there because they weren't a big thing in America.
Yeah,
Their first hit single, River Deep Mountain High, was like #1 in England,
yeah,
but it was heard of in America. So nobody really knew that much about them. And they were on before the Stones, and I was just like, Tina Turner came on. I was just, wow, what the hell's this? It was just incredible,
the
just
energy.
amazing.
Yeah.
She was so incredible, and the Ikettes, the way they were singing behind her, all the movements and everything, and Ike on his guitar with the band, just blew my mind away.
I can't imagine what that experience was like. Or for Mick, for that matter. I think he said, "I'm going to study this woman," which he did, and you know he stole some of her dance moves, and he ended up doing okay later in life.
Yeah, certainly did.
So the band morphed into another band called the Rare Breed. You guys were really seduced by a lot of blues, and I mean that's one thing that's really interesting about the UK. You talk about Ike and Tina Turner being revered over there, and not as much over here. There was a lot of blues artists as well that really didn't have a whole lot of success here in the States, but again were you know just thought of so highly by those of you overseas. And you mentioned that you were especially fond of Cream, no surprise, and you had an interesting encounter with Eric Clapton.
Yeah, when the Cream, when they were first on the way up, kind of thing, they used to still play pubs and little theatres.
Yeah,
And I went to see the Cream at this pub in Birmingham, and Clapton was playing like this Gibson Les Paul that everybody dreamt of being able to afford or even get their hands on it. And he
right.
turned around and smashed it, and I was like, "Oh no!" You could see all the guitarists in the whole place were like, "Oh no, no!" And he came down to the bar after the show, and he was like drinking at the bar. And I went up to him and said, "Why did you? Why did you smash that guitar?"
What were
And
you
he went, "Well,
thinking?
I didn't like it anyway."
Okay. Man, at least he could have handed it over to you for possible
Yeah, or
repairs.
any guitarist in there would have like done anything for him to get their hands on a Gibson Les Paul.
Yeah. You also mentioned, again, no surprise, that Jack Bruce you found mesmerizing, and that kind of planted some seeds, you know, later on as you gravitated towards the bass out of necessity.
Yeah, well, everybody'd heard of Clapton, and like as they said back then, Clapton was God. You know,
Yeah.
that was the thing back then. So everybody used to go and see the Cream because of Clapton. And I went there, and I think it's the third time I'd seen Cream, and I just happened to stand in front of Jack Bruce, and I was just like mesmerized at his bass playing, and it really hit home that people could do that with a bass guitar, and I didn't, just totally opened a whole new thing for me.
Yeah.
And after seeing that, I thought, well, I'm not a great guitarist, so I'm going to switch to bass, and that's how it came about.
Yeah, it sounded like there was also a need in a future band as well. Kind of was a necessity. You were also a visionary in that you were applying face makeup before Alice Cooper and Kiss, maybe not successfully, but you had the vision to at least attempt to do that as possibly an image that you portray from stage.
Yeah, well, the rare breed went through this psychedelic phase, and we just wanted to be as outrageous as we could. So we put all this makeup on and everything.
Yeah.
And we couldn't afford the smoke machine. So we had this guy throw bags of flour
You do
to
what you
make
have
like
to do.
to make like a smoke screen.
Yeah.
And of course, we used to get thrown off the stage because the stage would be covered in flour.
Yeah.
And I used to go and wipe all the makeup off on the towels in the toilet, and the manager of the place used to go nuts at me.
Yeah.
And so a lot of places would refuse to ever book us again because of that.
Well, again, forward thinking and resourceful as well. You refer to an iconic figure as an alien when you first experienced him on stage,
Who, Hendrix?
Hendrix.
Yeah, when he came on top of the pops, and he had this big afro haircut that,
Yeah.
nobody had ever seen anything like that before.
Right.
And playing left-handed with a Strat, and then he was playing it with his teeth, and he's just like, "What the hell is this?" And all these things were happening in the '60s. It was like all these new bands coming out.
Yeah.
Even on TV, you had things like Star Trek with the beam up machines and future iPhones and all that kind of stuff. So there
Right.
was all these new things happening all at the same time, and the flower power and students protesting against the war, and it's just like so many things going on back then. And like Hendrix, when I saw him, it's like, wow, what's this?
Yeah.
Um, it's just incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, he underscored that invitation for you and other musicians to basically be creative and not be boxed into a certain style or sound. And we're all thankful for that. There would have been no Black Sabbath without artists like the ones that you cited, that gave you the courage to be creative and
Yeah,
experiment and explore.
certainly Hendrix and the Cream, and then later Led Zeppelin.
Right. And I found it interesting, but not surprising that you said Frank Zappa made an impression, largely due to his unique lyrics. And I have to say, Geezer, I think you don't get anywhere near the credit deserved as far as being a lyricist. I mean, there's some casual fans that may not even be aware that you were the primary lyricist in Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everybody always assumes that the singer writes the lyrics,
That's
and
right.
so in Sabbath, everybody automatically assumed that Ozzy wrote the lyrics.
Right.
And sometimes he'd be doing interviews, and they'd ask him what the lyrics were about, and he wouldn't know because I'd written them. And yeah, I mean, Frank Zappa, he opened up a whole like totally different way of writing lyrics. It was all political and sarcastic and anti-establishment, counterculture stuff, all this kind of stuff. And him and Bob Dylan, I used to love the lyrics.
Yeah.
Uh, it was
Yeah.
just like, and that's I sort of followed them because I never wanted to just fall in and write just love songs, or about breaking up with your girlfriend, or you just fell in love with somebody. I wanted to get away from all that and be a bit more realistic.
And thankfully for us that you took that approach. Hey, let's hear from the fans a bit. Vince, hey Vince, thanks for joining us. AV saying hello, and Gerardo as well saying, hey Geezer, thanks so much for being here. I should point out, Geezer had a long flight in from the U.S. and he's taking a bullet for the team being here today, so he gets extra points for that. Jacqueline says hello from Minnesota. Cameron as well, and Ian is thanking you, Geezer, for writing this. Can't wait to read the book.
Oh, thanks, Ian. Hope you enjoy it.
I suspect he will. Cameron's asking, which chapter did you find the most difficult to write, if there was one?
Um, the most personal one, when my second son was born, with transposition of the great arteries, which was 2 weeks after my dad died.
Yeah.
And the only hope I had was for my son, from looking forward to my son being born.
Yeah.
And he was born, and the surgeon said he's got about 3 days to live, unless he has a hole punched through his heart. And I was the only one that could give the permission. And I looked out the window and I actually said, "Please, God, give me something. What should I do? Should I leave him the way he is, or should I go ahead and have the operation?" Which was like a 50-50 chance that he'd live.
Yeah.
And suddenly, and it was a terrible day. It's like dark and raining, thunder. And suddenly this rainbow opened up in the sky. And I
Wow.
just took it as a sign. And I said to the surgeon, "Go and do the operation." And he did it. And he's getting married next week. He's 40 years old now and getting married next week.
Congratulations. That's
And
amazing.
that was the hard part, because I didn't know whether to be that personal. But I always remember that somebody sent me that was at my lowest I've ever been, and
Yeah.
somebody sent me an article from the Reader's Digest of all things, and it was about the same thing, that their son had the same thing as my son, and she'd lost all hope, but then he came through it okay, and it just gave me that much hope.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. You made the right decision.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and this is from Donna. Did you have to warn anyone about anything in the book?
There was about Originally the manuscript was about 500 pages long,
Yeah.
and the publishing company freaked out at about 200 pages of it. So and they refused to publish it because
Yeah.
they were terrified of being uh, sued. And even the stuff that's in there, I had to prove absolutely everything in the book to the publishers. I had to show them photographs, films, letters, all kinds of things. And
For fear of lawsuits.
yeah, yeah. So a lot of the stuff was left out.
Yeah. I'm going to save this story for those to buy the book and read it. But yeah, you had an interesting description of one of Frank Zappa's parties.
It was a very interesting party.
It
Quite you,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, great read, I have to say. Yeah. I went back to it a couple of times, and that reminds me to tell everyone tonight we're celebrating one of rock's all-time greats, known as the co-founder, bassist, and primary lyricist for one of the most influential bands to date, with over 70 million records sold and still counting. He was responsible for the band's name, laying down the foundation of hard rock. His book, Into the Void, tells the story from his upbringing to the various stages throughout his musical career, and it's a fascinating read. The book is officially released today on paperback. Congratulations to Geezer on that. It's available now to Rock and Roll Channel fans, and it's his way of saying thank you. Geezer has graciously agreed to sign copies of Into the Void purchased here, but hurry as they're limited. And just hit the buy button, the big buy button, or type in buy if you're on Facebook. If you want to purchase it and you're watching us through Facebook, and the rest is quick, easy, and pain-free. The books are guaranteed to sell out, and there's no greater way to show your appreciation of such a great artist and author than by purchasing the latest body of work. So thanks for your continued support of Geezer. So your first, I think, crossing of paths with Tony and Bill, of course, Tony Iommi and Bill Ward, was when they were in a band called Mythology. That was your first introduction, wasn't it?
Yeah, the guitarist in my band at the time was friends with Mythology's singer,
Yeah,
and they came to see us when I was in the Rare Breed. Tony and Bill and Chris, the singer in Mythology, came to see our band, and Tony and Bill thought I was a complete lunatic.
yeah,
At the end of the night, because I used to be on these like really over the top speed pills. And this one night they came to see me. We used to play these all nighters. Used to go on from like 12 o'clock at night till 5 in the morning.
yeah,
And I had these speed pills uh, drank a bottle of vodka on top of it, and ended up smashing the stage up. And they were
Go
going, "Oh,
figure.
this guy's like total lunatic."
Yeah.
So, and then eventually, I saw them in this club that we all went to. It wasn't a club; it was a cafe
Uh-huh.
bar kind of thing. And we were talking about, what kind of music we each like, and we found out that we all like the same kind of music. And that was it. And that was it until we got together as for Sabbath.
And you comment too in 1968 that you were fired from your quote unquote proper job. And then reality set in. You had to make some decisions, and then it's almost in sequence. Your singer quits the band, and you see a notice posted at the local instrument shop stating Ozzy Zig needs a gig,
Yeah.
and you reached out to him.
Well, he had the magic words, has own PA.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I went, well, he's got to be good if he's got his own PA. So, and plus he lived two streets away from me.
And
So
yeah,
we needed a singer. So I went round to his house and his sister answered the door and she said, well, Ozzy's not in, but I'll give him the message. Got me a dress. And then later that night, there was a knock at the door. And my brother went to open the door and he went, hey, there's something at the door for you. And I said, what do you
something.
mean there's something? He says, go and see. And I went to the door and there was Ozzy with absolutely like a skinhead haircut because he just come out of prison. He had his dad's work gown on, a chimney brush over his shoulder, a dog's lead with a sneaker on the end of it, and no shoes on. And he went, I'm Ozzy. And I said, oh, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah,
And I said, well, what kind of music are you into? And he says, well, anything that you are. And I said, well,
right answer.
we're doing like blues and a bit of soul, Cream covers, Hendrix covers.
Yeah,
And he says, yeah, I'll do that. And I've got my own PA. And I says, okay, you're in. And so that's the way we joined up.
yeah. And you decided, I guess when you brought him on board, the first few gigs were pretty rough. You got booed off the stage, and it was clear that most of the members of the band, with the exception of you and Ozzy, weren't necessarily going to make a major commitment. And without your proper job or whatever, you're at a crossroads. And Ozzy suggested, hey, look, if we're going to do this, he suggested seeing Bill Ward as far as replacing your drummer at the time. And I guess you went through Tony to talk to Bill, and tell us about that first encounter with all four future members of Black Sabbath.
Well, at the time, we had a slide guitarist and a sax player in the
Yeah,
band. There was like the slide guitarist, sax player,
yeah,
Ozzy, me on rhythm guitar. And so we needed a drummer. And Ozzy had been to school with Tony. And Tony's mom had a sweet shop just down the road from where we both lived. And Tony and Bill had been busted up in Carlisle where they used to like do all their gigs.
yeah.
And came back home to Birmingham. And Tony and was hanging out at his mum's sweet shop. And uh, Ozzy said, let's go around to see Tony and to see what happened to his drummer. So we went round to Tony's house. And he says, we heard your drummer's back in Birmingham. And he went, well, actually, he's here now in the shop with me. And so Bill came to the door and he says, explain what we're going to do. And he says, yeah, I'll give it a go, but Tony has to come with me. And
Package deal.
so then that was like too many guitarists. There was like Tony lead guitar, the slide guitarist, and then me rhythm guitar. So I said, okay, I'll switch to bass because I was
Yeah.
like the least proficient on guitar. So I switched to bass, and we did 18 blues songs in one day, rehearsed them, and then went up to back up to Carlisle for our first gigs.
And yeah, I guess the first gig you drew off of Tony and Bill's following mythology. right? And you had a great turnout, but unfortunately, it didn't go quite as well as you had hoped.
Well, I'd never played bass before, so
Yeah,
on the way to the first gig, I stopped off at my ex bass player and borrowed his bass,
yeah,
and so that night was the first time I'd ever played bass, and it was just like looking down, going do,
yeah.
really basic, and these people at the end are like going, "You and Ozzy are absolutely crap." And I said, "Oh, thanks." And they said to Tony and Bill, "Go and get your old singer and your old bass player back. These pair of crap. You're never going to do anything with these two." And that was it. First show.
Real visionaries they were, weren't they? What's interesting too is there's similarities to the Beatles in that respect. Because Paul McCartney was actually the rhythm guitarist in the band, and then when they lost their bassist Stuart Sutcliffe, he volunteered to move over to bass.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and you also, I thought was interesting. You kind of described Tony and Ozzy's relationship, and there was a cadence about them right from the beginning that you said lasted through time. And there's, I guess, an age difference or a great difference of 1 year or so, and so Tony kind of had a tendency to talk down a bit to Ozzy as a result, which is pretty common when you're younger.
Yeah, well, they both went to the same school together, and it was a rough school.
Yeah,
And Tony and Albert Chapman, Tony's best mate, they were like not the bullies, but like the sort of ones that you don't mess with. And Tony was went to have boxing lessons as well when he was a
yeah,
teenager, so he could really handle himself. So people were like, you'd never messed with Tony,
yeah.
and because they went to the same school, Ozzy still carried that on like it in after school. He was still a bit where you don't upset Tony kind of thing. But I mean, the first thing Tony said to Ozzy was, "Oh no, not you, Osborne." And but
Talk
it
about a
went
welcome
great.
mat.
I mean, I can't believe that they kept me on as the bass player because I was terrible at first, and
Yeah.
Tony and Bill really encouraged me. And if it wasn't for Bill's playing, I'd never have been able to play bass.
How fortuitous for sure. And eventually you guys settled on a new name. You named the band Earth.
Yeah, at first it was Polka Talk Blues Band.
That's
Um,
right.
we went up north, did two gigs where we were told we were terrible.
Yeah.
And Tony, we got back to Birmingham, and Tony says, "I'm not playing with another guitarist." So he's gone. And the sax player could only play Take Five by Dave Brubeck.
You can't do that for 90 minutes.
We used to have the sax break, and he played on every sax break. So he had to go.
Yeah.
So eventually it just came to the four of us. And that was the start of, we changed the name because Ozzy just like came up with Polka Talk Blues Band because it was the name of an Indian sari shop on the way to the first gig. And so we got back and Bill came up with the name Earth.
Yeah, which is actually a pretty good name. And then came the gig. There was a lot of learnings in this, discoveries. Came the gig. You guys opened up for Jethro Tull, and Ian Anderson, almost like parting the sea, comes in while you guys are in the middle of your set or wherever it was, and he was mesmerized with Tony, and much to your dismay, offered him a gig to join Tull. Their first U.S. tour was in the works. That was going to happen. Money was a lot better. How could he possibly say no? This could have been the end. And again, could have changed Jethro Tull's trajectory. Not to mention the fact that we wouldn't have had a Black Sabbath as we know it. And how ironic. Maybe you can share a little bit of how that turned out.
Well, Jethro Tull were like the up and coming massive band at the time. And they
Yeah,
were just like everybody loved Jethro Tull. They were like the new Zeppelin back in England at the time, and
right.
as big as them. And when we saw, I mean, you never got Ian Anderson walking into the crowd to look at us. So when he did, we were like going, "Oh no, what's going to happen now?" He was just staring at Tony, and we
Yeah,
all knew that something was going to happen. So then the inevitable happened. He asked Tony to join Jethro Tull. So Tony went down to London to rehearse with them, but it was two like alpha males kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, Ian Anderson was trying to tell Tony what to play, and of
Yeah.
course, you don't tell Tony that.
You
So
don't.
Tony wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the
Thankfully.
week, I went down with Tony because there was nothing else. I didn't have anything else to do. I couldn't. It was like my life had ended.
Yeah.
Um,
I can
I was
understand.
totally in despair, and I went down to London with Tony, and we were in this sharing this flat. And he said to me at the end of the week, "I'm not doing this. I'm not taking people telling me what to play." He says, "But I'm going to come back to the band, and we're going to rehearse every day and start writing our own songs." And that was it. It's like the best thing that ever happened to us.
Yeah. And you cite that your first song that you written was a song entitled Wicked World, and then you guys got a string of dates, again similar to the Beatles, out in Hamburg at the Star Club, the legendary Star Club, and that's where you guys really started cutting your chops and kind of the chemistry starts forming. And you mentioned that MIB was born from that trip as well.
Yeah, well, we thought because the Beatles had played the Star Club and it was probably the most famous club in the world at that time. So we thought it was like great to be able to go to this incredible club that everybody knew. But when we got there, it was like well past its sell-by date,
Yeah,
and there was nobody was there. There was like a couple of sailors would come in and a couple of prostitutes, and that would be it. And we used to
yeah.
have to play 8 45-minute sets every day,
I can't imagine that.
and so we just used to use them as writing. You know, we
Yeah.
used to write all our stuff by them. But by the time we'd finished at the Star Club, we'd like probably written most of the first album.
That's incredible. I just want to remind fans we're here celebrating the release of the paperback version of Into the Void, the autobiography by the one and only Geezer Butler. So type in buy if you're on Facebook, if you want to make the purchase, and hit the big buy button on TalkShop Live site if that's how you're watching it. And I mean, think about it. Over 70 million records sold. These guys influenced so many musicians, so many bands. Without them, I mean, we wouldn't have some of the great hard rock acts today. So let's support the one and only Geezer Butler. There's no greater way to do so, and he's gracious enough to agree to sign a good quantity of these books, but they will sell out. So pull the trigger now, folks. Now's the time. And I just finished reading it. It's an absolute great read. So I want to say, Geezer, another turning point was when you returned home. You saw King Crimson, and this was really insightful too. They played Mars from the Planet Suite, and you go out, you buy the record, and the next thing you know, the band's working up the song Black Sabbath. And it was really from the stylizing of playing or picking out the notes on the guitar that kind of created almost the sound of Black Sabbath as well as the name.
Yeah, well, I loved the Planet Suite by Holst, particularly Mars, and I used to play it on the bass, like the tritone thing,
Right.
and I was getting ready to rehearse one day. I was just playing it, just to warm up on my bass, and I think that sort of got into Tony's mind, and he came out with down, 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 and that was it. Never looked back.
See, and you didn't demand that he play it, right? You took the different approach as opposed to Ian
Oh,
Anderson's
I
approach.
didn't even intend for the band to be playing it. It was just like,
Yeah.
I was just practicing on my bass.
Yeah, I love that. And then you figured, once you'd worked up the song, it was untested live. You did, the regular fare that the fans that showed up expected to hear, and then you kind of throw them this curveball with Black Sabbath, and you're thinking, okay, they're all going to exit, like there's somebody called fire in the room, right? They're all going to bail for the doors, and quite the opposite. Their eyes bug out, and you just connect it with them in a whole nother way. And that was a really important moment, I think, in Black Sabbath's career.
Yeah, well, we used to play this regularly play this blues club in Lichfield, which is just outside Birmingham, and like
Yeah,
it was literally a blues club. So every band that played there would play blues, 12 bar blues, and we went there this one night, and we'd written Black Sabbath that morning, and we got the usual non-response from the audience in the club. But, oh, here comes Earth again playing the 12 bar like everybody else.
yeah,
And to try and get some reaction out of them, I just says, let's play that song that we wrote this morning. And so we did it, played Black Sabbath, and the place just went absolutely crazy.
right.
And we realized, that we were going in the right direction.
It's something. It really is. Jeremy wants to know which genre of music other than your own would you love to play and with whom?
Oh gosh. Um, that's a difficult one. Uh, I suppose going back to the Beatles, I suppose, but
Yeah,
it'd have to be with Ringo because Paul McCartney's the bass player.
there you go. Although he likes to play guitar too, I don't think he would mind sliding over to guitar if you were there.
I think he probably would.
Yeah. So Nate wants to know if you guys interacted with the Welsh band Budgie during your time at Rockfield with Roger Bain.
No, we didn't really see them. I mean, we knew of them, and I
Yeah.
think we met them maybe once, but that was it. We never really, gelled together.
Mike is saying, "Hey Geezer, hey Steve, I pre-ordered the book when it first showed up, available. Thanks for rocking me through my teens and still now as I come close to 70 years of age." I was going to ask you, boy, with the rebirth of vinyl, we kind of recaptured lost generations, which used to be the core music fan, the buying, those that were buying records for years, which were, teens and young adults. And we lost them to some degree, if you could say that, to file sharing at first with Napster and then Apple and Amazon and then streaming. But, all of a sudden, this vinyl thing came back and a lot of younger people discovered it. And I'm just curious, the latter days when you guys reunited, for example, with Sabbath, there were a lot of younger kids there that weren't there at the beginning. And that had to be eye-opening and thrilling for you to see that and experience that.
Yeah, it's always been amazing to me because there's
Yeah,
no way when I was younger that I'd go and see my dad's bands.
right.
It's just no way. And when we did the last tour at Sabbath, there was so many like teenagers, a lot of teenagers, kids in the 20s. It's incredible. It's just like of all ages were there. I think the dads bring the sons and stuff like that, and
Yeah,
so it goes on. And it was really strange because this week our first album, Black Sabbath, has come in at number 23 in Billboard, which was
amazing.
I just couldn't believe it. And it's like number 6 on the vinyl charts because they just re-released it on vinyl.
Yeah, and rightfully so, man. You know what? Great music and a great band stands the test of time, and that's definitely true with you guys.
I think because we were so basic when we did the songs. I mean, we had 2 days to do the first album, 5 days for the second album. So it's just literally live albums. And I think, it wasn't overproduced, it wasn't overdubbed. And I think that's why it stands the test of time.
I think you're right. Mind-boggling to me that you spent 5 days recording Paranoid.
Yeah, yeah. And that was, we even had to write Paranoid in the studio because we didn't have enough songs on the album at the time. And the producer says you're 3 minutes short of it being classed as an album.
Yeah,
And you got to write a song that lasts at least 3 minutes. And Tony came up with the Paranoid riff. Ozzy came out with the vocal line. I quickly wrote down the lyrics, and it was all done in like 3 hours.
Something else that we learned from the book too was that you had your struggles with depression, but there really wasn't a forum or a pathway for you to deal with it. And Paranoid in particular was a song that was autobiographical and that you were kind of speaking to some of those feelings that you had. And it's pretty amazing that you've come through it after all this time, because that's a demon that's really tough to battle if you don't have a way to be able to treat it or to handle it with some direction.
Well, it's just unless you've experienced like true depression, you can't describe it. It's like you go
Yeah.
into this awful black hole,
Yeah.
and people say like, "Oh, just go and have a drink or take the dog for a walk." That's what the doctors used to say. Or go
Yeah.
and watch television or read a book. And of course, you got no interest in anything. So the only way I could express myself was writing the lyrics for Paranoid. That was, I mean, I wasn't depressed all the time, but when I used to
Right.
get these dep bouts of depression, you just couldn't explain it to anyone. And you were terrified that, you go to a mental health person maybe, and they put you in hospital for years, a mental institution. So
Right.
you'd never go to doctors or anything like that. And so you just had to get on with it. And the only way I could get it out of my system was to write the lyrics.
We're so fortunate that you found that positive, form to deal with it. How are you doing today? You seem really
Yeah, good
great.
now. Yeah. Yeah. Because I finally, in 1999, I was finally properly diagnosed.
Yeah.
Um, and they put me on Prozac for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And the doctor says it's not going to work straight away. Keep keep taking it for 6 weeks, and eventually you'll start feeling like normal again. And I said, "Well, what's normal?"
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a new
after
experience for
six
you.
weeks, after 6 weeks, this big cloud seemed to lift off me. It's great.
That's what a great story. You had a big hit. Number four, Paranoid was number four in the UK on the singles chart. And I encourage anybody to go on YouTube or wherever you watch music videos and watch Black Sabbath's appearance on Top of the Pops, because you're seeing all these kids having a great time dancing to Paranoid, and that is worth the price of admission alone. I would pay good money to have been in that audience.
What was it? An out and out pop song, really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It had a beat. Boy, they were moving to it. That's for sure. And the other thing that was interesting too was that you were pigeonholed because of the name, because of the cover art, right from the get go. That you were preaching, satanic practices and everything, and it was the exact opposite of that. And I guess there were pros and cons. The critics, used to pile on you guys, but for that matter, same was true for Led Zeppelin. Shows what kind of taste these critics have and vision that they have. But it worked in reverse to what the intention was of the name and the message that you were conveying.
Well, we all liked horror films at the time,
Yeah,
and I think Tony once said, "Wouldn't it be great to do like music that conveyed like the feeling you get from horror films?" So it's absolutely nothing to do with Satanism and all that crap. And
right.
in fact, there was a band in England at the time called Black Widow, who used to do like these fake sacrifices to the devil on stage. And we used to think that it was like the corniest thing you'd
Yeah,
ever seen. So we were like the total opposite to all that. And the song Black Sabbath was actually a warning about getting involved with Satanism and all that kind of stuff.
yeah. How ironic. So things just explode, but people assume because you've got great success, the money's pouring in, and you're going to be financially secure for life. That certainly wasn't true. You guys were having a great time at first. You're on the road, but you're constantly on the road. 1 year goes by, 2 years go by. You're pumping out albums. You've got that pressure as well to kind of keep the momentum going. And inevitably, what happens is, you start to crash, right? I mean, and you develop habits, and this is a common story. That's a very unnatural lifestyle being in a very successful band, particularly in the era that you guys were in?
Well, yeah, because we were taking drugs just to keep us going.
Yeah,
And, we were all in the same hotels every night, in the same rooms. We'd be partying, but then eventually it just wears you out. And you just have to concentrate on, I mean, you can't be partying every night or anything like that. Eventually, Tony collapsed of total exhaustion at the Hollywood Bowl
yeah,
in uh, in California, and we desperately needed to take a rest because we hadn't been off the road or out of a studio for like 4 years, and
yeah.
he'd had
Incredible.
enough. He collapsed. He couldn't go on anymore,
So
and
you took I think, yeah,
the doctors just told him to, like, you can't do this any longer. You got to take months off.
yeah, thankfully. And I think it was probably about a 14-month break. You guys come back and man, you're great on the road. Still some really great music that you're pumping out, but eventually it becomes a challenge. Tony wants to kind of experiment a little bit more, and the material isn't quite at the level that you'd like. And eventually, and many people have heard the story that you were in the very difficult but obvious position where you had, Ozzy was just off the rails and just, probably saved his life as a result. You had to say, hey, we got to part ways.
Yeah, I mean, we were all disillusioned by the end of the '70s. We'd never seen any accounts from the management that we had.
Right?
We had like the worst record and publishing deals ever. Because,
Yeah,
when we were young, all you want to do is get a record contract, so you don't know what you're signing, and it was
that's right.
basic. It's like the lowest you could possibly be signed up for,
Yeah,
and the management took advantage of us. We never got any accounts, and the end of the '70s, we didn't have hardly any money left, and we'd done all these like millions of albums, sold out tours everywhere,
yeah,
and hardly anything to show for it. And we were all in quite a bad way physically, and drinking and drugging and all that kind of stuff, and it just couldn't go on anymore. And Ozzy was probably hurt him the most from his addictions.
yeah,
And Tony just said one day, it can't go on like this. Ozzy's, just not into it anymore. And he says,
yeah.
I've met a guy called Ronnie James Dio who's just left Richie Blackmore's Rainbow.
Right.
He's looking for a gig, and he's got a great voice. And Ronnie came in, he just blew us all away with his
Yeah,
singing.
pump pump new life into the band for sure. But you look, there's personalities and issues and that arise eventually. He ends up leaving, but you end up, bringing in a guy that wasn't too shabby either, and that was Ian Gillan, who was fantastic on the new material, but the challenge wasn't really cut out to sing the classic Black Sabbath songs that you had to play and everybody wanted to hear.
Yeah, and plus Deep Purple had a completely different fan base to Black Sabbath. It was
Right,
almost they were almost like enemies,
right.
and the Deep Purple fans couldn't forgive Gillan for joining Sabbath, and they couldn't forgive Sabbath for having Deep Purple singer.
Yeah, you couldn't win
So
either way.
it was really awkward, and plus we had the ridiculous Stonehenge thing happen.
Every band
Um,
has to go through that, though.
and it was like, yeah, it was like Spinal Tap uh, being brought to life.
Yeah,
And eventually, because originally it wasn't supposed to be called Black Sabbath, it was supposed to be like Gil and Naomi Butler Ward kind of thing,
well, that would
or
have
or,
been different.
or a completely different name. That's what we
Yeah,
thought was going to happen. But the Warner Brothers said, no, we've got you contracted as Black Sabbath, and that's what your album's got to be. So we went along with it, and it only lasted that one album and one world tour.
yeah, and probably again for good reason. You end up eventually you're going through ups and downs, different label changes, but you reunite with Dio later, come out with a really terrific album, Dehumanizer, that I think brought some life back into the band and the image and everything. Um, and then you face some really tough times with when Ronnie was diagnosed with cancer, sadly. And then fast forwarding 2011, you guys make a major announcement at the Whiskey of Go-Go, a Go-Go of all places, that the original lineup is reuniting. You're going to do a new album and likely a tour. And unfortunately, I mean, fortunately, we got a great record out of it. You paired up with Rick Rubin, but there were issues, financial with Bill and I guess Sharon, and unfortunately, his involvement with the band was very short lived.
Yeah, I mean, we were all rehearsing together,
Yeah,
and we'd written about 8 songs together, and everything was going great. Rick Rubin was coming in every day and listening to the stuff, and we just took a break so that we, get freshened up a bit. So we said we'll have a month holiday and then come back fresh. And me and my wife went to Hawaii, and I came back from Hawaii, and Bill was out of the band. And what the hell, what's happened?
yeah.
And I've still, to this day, never got an answer why he
Wow.
was out of the band.
Well, it's still a great experience for those that did show up on the tour. The record was terrific, and you guys went out the proper way. I mean, on top of your game, and we have you to thank for that. I want to remind everybody just to click the big buy button on Talk Shop Live or comment buy on Facebook. Do you want to buy this great book from Geezer Butler? And here's the other thing: this guy's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member, and rightfully so. They pioneered what I call hard rock. I'm going to ask one of the last questions I'm going to ask, and we're going to talk about that. But this is a brilliant book, and again, goes through his whole lifespan. And I just glossed over some really important points in his career that are absolutely interesting and a great read. So trust me, we're just skimming the surface with the conversation today. And again, the gentleman was gracious enough to sign it. And there's no greater way to show your support than by supporting the author and the artist's latest body of work. So thanks for your support on that. Geezer, I got to ask you really quickly, and thanks, man, for staying awake. I put people to sleep, man, and you deserve a medal for this. And we're going to send one overseas to you. But people think that, having the throne, being aligned with the term heavy metal, is like a badge of honor. And I guess over time it's morphed into it in what its meaning is now these days. But the original phrase, you guys were aligned directly with it. It was you and a couple of other bands that were pointed to heavy metal, and it was not meant in favorable terms, right?
No, it was a derogatory term.
Yeah,
It was one review we had of one of the gigs we did was the reviewer said, "This isn't music. It just sounds like a load of heavy metal being banged together."
yeah,
It was an American review of one of the gigs in America. By the time it got back to England, the English press thought it was a good label to put on as heavy metal. So it was a bit sarcastic at the time, but then
yeah,
it turned into people just took it up as a form of music kind of thing. Put a label
absolutely.
on it.
Yeah, really interesting to get that background. So the book is somewhat behind you. Again, congratulations on the release of the paperback version, which is an indication of how successful it's been. So you have to feel really good about that. But what are the plans for Geezer Butler for the balance of 2024 or even beyond? Are there?
Just to kick back and enjoy my grandkids and family and animals.
Good for you. You've earned that right, Geezer.
I think I have, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you have. You've given us a lot. And before you go, thanks so much for doing this. We want to thank all the fans for joining us on the Rock and Roll channel on Talk Shop Live. It's been an absolute honor, privilege to have you on. And a big thanks to Gloria for putting up with Geezer #1 and for especially helping us through all of this. She gets a gold star and a medal as well. And to Chip Ruggieri, Chipster's PR and consulting. Single-handedly helped make this happen. Really passionate about you, Geezer, in this book, you should know. So he's carrying the torch for you. Also to Nicole Clayton behind the scenes. Thank you, Nicole. And thanks to Carly Stephanie, Heidi Richter, and Darren and all at HarperCollins, the publisher, for having the foresight to actually publish this book and also to help support it. To Brian, Tina, Joe, Brad, Jenny, and behind the scenes, today's Sam. Thank you, as always, for a great job from TalkShopLive and the fulfillment partners at ReaderLink, but most importantly, the amazing Geezer Butler for continuing to share his literary and musical gifts with all of us, and for your time today. Geezer, before we part company, any last words you'd like to leave with your fans?
Well, thank you for being the greatest fans ever and sticking with us for 55 years. And if you're new to the band, great, thanks for joining us. And if it wasn't for the fans, then I wouldn't be here and none of us would.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, we say this often today, but in these contentious times, music is the one common bond that we all have. We can all coexist under one roof when we listen to music, such as the music that you put out through all of these years. It brings people together, and it's really important medicine in this day and age. So don't forget to pick up a copy of Into the Void, autographed by Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Geezer Butler. And while you're at it, pick one up for your family and friends. They'll thank you for it, and I have it on good authority. It will enhance their quality of life. And with that, Geezer, thanks again, and everybody stay safe, enjoy life, rock on, and so long, everybody.
Thanks, Steve. All the best.